Hello, everybody. It's Michael Jacob with Unleashing Intuition Secrets, joined once again by Leon Zagami. Wow, you've been on a tear. I just saw you recently. You're on what was it? What was the guy's show that just lost his channel? His show?
Yeah, somebody who lost his channel. I don't know, man. I don't know anything about it. I'm innocent. No. But tell me, who is it?
So think of his name, Alex Jones. So Alex Jones.
Well, of course, and that's been a great loss because we have
Yeah.
thousands of videos there, interviews, articles, and all of this just went up in smokes. And now we really don't know how to replace the visibility the band of video gave to people like me who are constantly shadow banned and censored on platforms like YouTube or Facebook. We even tried to go on Facebook, on my own personal Facebook with this show, and I couldn't do it. So it's a constant, censorship. So it is a big loss. I know that Alex is persevering, and he should, of course. But Infowars, let's say, it was the only attempt, really, that the alternative media did to really become, let's say, imposing in their structure almost like the mainstream media. So there were millions that were, of course, invested in it, and there were a lot of people working there. So a lot of people also lost their jobs, which that's also, I'm sad about that. And then all this whole thing about the onion taking over, because it's still off the air, and it seems like, they're doing nothing with the years and years of history, because that's how it is. The system wanted Infowars out, and they started to fight us already 10 years ago. They removed most of our videos from YouTube, and then inevitably they tried all these lawsuits connected to the Sandy Hook debacle. I wasn't involved with that whole Sandy Hook thing, so I can't really tell you. I started to work with Infowars in 2015. Alex came down to Rome, and we started working together. So I wasn't really acquainted with what went on earlier, but apparently they use it as an excuse, because if we go back to the First Amendment, it seems a little bit too much to punish with over $1 billion, And aside from that, what are they going to get out of it? Because by selling simply the infrastructure, the equipment, and so on, they might maybe scrap 1 million if they're lucky. It's not really like one thing is, of course, Infowars, the way we knew it, reaching millions of people, constantly working, selling products and all, and so that had actually a material value. But one thing that I didn't like was when this lawyer from the Sandy Hook families came in. One of the first things that he actually did was to remove my books from the Infowars store.
Wow.
Which then created a problem, because of course I was relying on that income generated from the sales at the store, and at the same time it of course signaled the fact that they had some problems with me being there.
They used it as a way to basically silence, because Alex and of course you now are a lot of our mouthpieces for things that we know are corrupt out there. And so for decades, he was basically exposing so many great stuff.
I think about it. I started 20 years ago. Alex started 30 years ago. We were the pioneers when it came down to alternative information. We fought, and of course, they also fought us. In fact, as you know, I had to flee Europe and Italy because after my work with Alex and the work I was doing at the time, it became inevitable that they will have silenced me also with never-ending lawsuits, making it impossible for me to make a living. So that's it. In the end, we are still here. and I'm sure that we are going to continue to be here for a long time because we persevere. I mean, I noticed one thing, that of course, not having anymore a platform, a band of video, influences also all the other platforms which I have, because it kind of, it makes the less visibility, let's say. But thanks to people like you, at least are having me on, well, maybe we can bypass that problem.
Yeah. Yes, it's been great, having you on, and keeping your information alive. I know you're on a lot of people's shows, but we always appreciate it when you come on ours, because you're.
Well, I want to just say that, I mean, I always like being on your show because you're very direct, very honest about, discussing subjects without really, basing your questioning or your line of thought simply on the narrative, but able to open up, let's say.
Yeah. And, like you've been all over the world, and you lived in one of the toughest places to live, in Italy. So, and, Giorgione, whatever, what's her name?
Meloni, yes.
Maloney. So, you dimed her out early on. I was like, wow, she's great. And you're like, oh, no, she's not. And sure enough, she proved herself here more recently. So I was like,
well, let me explain you something.
He was on it.
Europe is ruled by the Jesuits and a certain form of Freemasonry. On Friday, so basically a couple of days ago, they were all in Germany giving their favorite award, which is the most important award they have been giving since 1950 to all the people who helped building up Europe. And it's called the Charlemagne Prize. So all of the various, the German chancellor was there, von der Leyen was there, and of course the guy who received the award was a member of the Illuminati, Mario Draghi, who used to be a banking system man, then later on became also prime minister during the pandemic, and probably it's in line to become in the near future also the Italian president. But this guy comes directly from the Jesuits. I mean, he's a Jesuit product, left, back, and center. And if you actually go on the internet and you see the way he was sitting down there, all with these medals, in a very Masonic way, they don't even hide it, when they are in that kind of environment. So it's about really seeing that Europe is going down the drain, and even himself, when he was receiving the award, because he likes to be the guy who bosses everybody around in Europe, he said, "We are alone now. We have been left alone now," because they know that Europe is now really the one that is being fought here. You see, while America is doing deals with Russia, with China, and it's kind of operating a division in what will be basically a new world order very close to what George Orwell was depicting in 1984. Because, we will keep this hemisphere, and that is what they're doing. China and Russia will take care of Eurasia, and that is simply what was happening also in George Orwell. There will be the Middle East used as a constant ground for an eternal war, because war is part of this unfortunate process in this new world order disorder. And so, for me to see that the Europeans acknowledge now that they have to get out of this mess alone, we will not be getting them out anytime soon, because they are also being themselves to blame, in the way they have acted. Now, it seems like secretly, and this is going to probably piss off a lot Trump when it comes out, a few European nations are now trying to make a deal with Iran to get through the Strait of Hormuz. And that is inevitably going to clash with the current American administration. Then we have, of course, what is happening with Ratcliffe going to Cuba. And Cuba is a Jesuit stronghold. The Castros have always been very close. I know it's a paradox because formally it's a communist country, but if you go and study the history of Cuba, is deeply entrenched in Jesuitry as well as Freemasonry.
Wow.
which has actually stayed there even after Castro's takeover, because Fidel Castro and Che Guevara were both 33rd-degree Freemasons. So here we have Cuba in a situation of uncertainty because Castro, of course, the brother of Fidel Castro, is very old. And apparently he has said to Ratcliffe that he would be willing of sacrificing himself for his country getting arrested. So that is something that, of course, has not been made public yet. Most Cuban media are actually blocked here in the United States. You can't access the main news agency in Cuba from here anymore.
Huh.
So I think one of the main one is called Pensa. I'm not sure, but I think that's the name. Anyway, aside from this situation there, I think the most relevant thing that happened, also in relation to the last few articles, which I posted on Zagami.com, I'm not being super active, as you have noticed probably, but that also the reason for that is that I have a super secret project that will see the light within the next 2 weeks. I'm not allowed to say anything. It's in collaboration with some very, very important figures within the disclosure, let's say, but the real disclosure, not the fake. I'm talking about people at very high level. And so it's gonna come out like within 2 weeks. I can, if you want, I can tell you the title of the project, and that's it. In 2 weeks, I will tell you the rest, because otherwise I will get in trouble with my collaborators.
That'd be good.
So the title is The Vatican's Top Secret Alien Agenda: Hidden Encounters, Forbidden Rituals, and Jesuit Astronomers in the Age of UFO Disclosures. And that's it.
Oh my God. That's a good TE title. That's good job. Good job.
And there is some exclusive material in it. There is the collaboration of one of the most eminent ufologists in the world, and some of the most important organizations in the world. It's a very serious project. I mean, I've been working on it for a few months now, and of course, in a couple of weeks, I will be with you and I will present it, and you will understand the relevance of it.
I look forward to it. That's great.
Anyway, for the meantime, let's focus on what has happened with Tulsi Gabbard and the CIA and MK Ultra and the JFK assassination, because these are very important things that we need to discuss and we need to acknowledge. You know, there is a whole controversy, and this controversy is basically following the congressional hearings that involved MK Ultra and the CIA whistleblower who testified. And suddenly it came out that 40 boxes of JFK and MK Ultra files that were previously under the purview of Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard were taken back by the CIA. I mean, the CIA, as you know, and I mean, you have worked for them, they don't have any authority here in the United States. They have authority outside of the United States. And so to actually...
And their boss.
Well, theoretically, because because here we are talking about an inner fight of the deep state of infinite proportions, if you think about it. Now, as you know, a couple of years ago, I published this book, which is volume 11, which is focused on MK Ultra and also the links with Lee Harvey Oswald. And that is the problem here. It's not only MK Ultra, it's also Lee Harvey Oswald and, of course, the assassination of John Fitzgerald Kennedy, which is a matter which they still deem a high priority, and they didn't want even Tulsi to have it in her office. I mean, they apparently, I mean, there has been a lot of talk around it, but let's make it clear. That the Director of National Intelligence, in theory, is Tulsi Gabbard. She presides over all the various agencies. Now, we have 14, 15 of them. She presides over all of them.
Right.
Now, as a spokesman for Tulsi Gabbard, of course, issued a flat denial. But That's not the case when it comes to the usual mover and shaker Anna Paulina Luna, who is very active, as you know. She likes to always put her hands there with
these days. Wow, I wonder who gave her that power. That's pretty crazy.
she
Youngster,
loves to dig deep, let's say.
Yep.
And she's not giving up on the whole thing.
Mm-mm.
So it's very important to understand that today bringing up MK Ultra is a little bit of a paradox, because of course the people who were responsible, they're all dead. The victims are not, though. There is still victims who are actually asking for compensation, especially in Canada. There is victims, of course, that have never been acknowledged in other parts of the world, including here, the United States of America. But because of their intention of using the plausible deniability, that's why they did a lot of experiments in Canada in the first place. However, the problem here is that the link, especially when it comes, when it comes to Lee Harvey Oswald, because Lee Harvey Oswald, if you see him as a loose cannon, if you see him as simply a guy who, that's it. Lee Harvey Oswald is just like a lone gunman, and the theory of the lone gunman. But then we know that that is a cover-up for something else. We know that he had, in the early 50s, he had been recruited while in a Marine base in Japan for MK Ultra. We know that eventually he will go to Russia, already in the hands of MK Ultra. He will then come back from Russia with the actual American embassy paying thousands of dollars for him to come back, which is unheard of for a guy who had been in the Soviet Union and, of course, had become some kind of enemy of the United States, because at that point, whoever from America left their citizenship to go to the Soviet Union was already branded as a traitor. So that's it. However, the situation here is that we have CIA Director John Ratcliffe on notice, also by Representative Anna Paulina Luna. Will she manage to get anything out of him? I doubt it. I doubt it, but we hope that something will eventually be disclosed. But this demonstrates that, unfortunately, even after so many decades, the topic is rather fresh. So let's explain to our audience maybe why MK Ultra is still a problem for the system. I think that basically when you consider that MK Ultra today is the product of its age, it was active mainly between 1953 and even earlier, let's say 1950 till 1973, even if 1953 was the year they formally called it MK Ultra, because it was called in various ways before, finally calling it MK Ultra, this mind control that they wanted to exercise, especially through the experimentation of drugs like LSD. Today, that will be kind of laughable. Okay, we are living in an era in which, as you know, even as a veteran, we only had a few weeks ago Trump in the White House discussing the use of psychedelic drugs for veterans and kind of opening, that possibility, because it seems that it actually helps people. However, in the 1950s and 60s, when this whole human mind control and psychological manipulation, experiments went on, what happened? It happened that they had, of course, experiments all over the world, not only in the United States. And I can tell you that also from a very personal, because my father at one point was actually working in this MK Ultra program in France, in Paris, at the Sorbonne. They had a specific experiment that was going on. an experiment amongst young doctors in psychiatry who were taking LSD, and then they will, he explained me, my father, like, for example, like there were 5 or 6 doctors, and certain doctors will take the LSD, certain others will not take the LSD. Then at the end of the night, they will have to report on who was the one who took LSD, what kind of reactions compared to the ones who didn't take LSD, and all this, of course, very...
That's amazing. I thought it was just in the U.S., like Fort Detrick and some other areas.
No. There is actually...
Wow.
We found, imagine, even in Norway, where I was living back in the days, in Oslo, a clinic which was called Lovisenberg, which was involved in MK Ultra.
Wow.
So there was a variety, within the whole NATO, let's say, alliance.
Wow.
And of course, because it was done out of the national territory, it would be even, let's say, easier in a way to then act with the clause of plausible deniability. And then, of course, the laws, they were very good at mystifying and trying to manipulate the various authorities in not taking. But my father, for example, told me he met once an MK Ultra agent who was from the Basque region in Spain, in Greece in the 70s, early 70s. He was the biggest LSD dealer in the whole of Greece.
Wow.
And there is also reports of a similar guy who was arrested and then released by the Italian authorities because he had infiltrated also a terrorist group in Italy who was doing the same thing.
Wow.
So you see, it's much bigger than simply,
What a huge web. I had no idea. Incredible.
And when they recruited, like I explained in volume 11, here I talk also about my father, I talk about the various experiments, but I talk also about Lee Harvey Oswald being recruited because he willingly joined the experiments. And at that time, there were already the first experiments also in implants.
Wow.
Now, we're not talking about sophisticated implants. Don't imagine anything like we could have nowadays. We are talking about simply triggering a small electric reaction in your brain, so you will be doing something in a certain way. And these experiments apparently involved even at one point Lee Harvey Oswald, though this was then conveyed by a guy who wrote, there was a book that came out in 1967, which was this book here, We Were Controlled, okay? Now, this book was apparently written by a guy who, of course, wanted to hide himself. So it wasn't really the real name. But he was very high up.
Wow.
And what he reveals in this book is still shocking to this day in all the various experiments that were done. And of course, I think that this guy here that presented himself in front of the Watergate, he was convicted. And he was probably the most influential guy in the whole JFK thing. This was in front of the Watergate committee, but he was Howard Hunt.
Right.
And apparently it was him who actually wrote that book. But we don't know that for sure, because definitely was always kind of like left there in the air. However, going back to this whole situation, when it comes down to MK Ultra and JFK, there is definitely things that still to this day will, of course, create a problem. Like I said, not so much for the doctors involved or the people, the various intelligence officers who have been long dead, probably. But of course, they will show and they will prove that the Manchurian Candidate narrative is not just simply, a book that then became a film, that then suddenly disappeared when you had the murder of JFK, because the Manchurian Candidate was more than a movie. It was about revealing the truth. JFK had to talk personally with Frank Sinatra about it, and eventually give his permission directly to Frank Sinatra to go and move forward with the whole project.
Wow.
So
many different things. The MK Ultra, Manchurian Candidate stuff, but so many other things, controlling the population with that, still ongoing, I'm sure.
Let's say this, that once they understood that certain experimentation concerning especially drugs had reached their peak level and couldn't really bring any other result, that's when in 1973 they already destroyed so much evidence, because then the year after there was a so-called scoop, I think, on the New York Times or one of these publications, and then at that point it became a public domain that they had been doing this MK Ultra thing, which was a program with 162, I think, sub-projects. So it was a very complex program also to analyze, because you had a whole different projects within that were doing completely different things. And you have
another reason why they have it they had it in all those different countries, because it's compartmentalized. So they want certain information about this, and they have these doctors work on that, and they don't know anything about the other doctors working on their project, and they take all the information and use it. And none of the doctors have any idea that it's for bad purposes, illicit.
Absolutely. And then you had also the fact that there were certain centers, certain institutes that were used. Here in California, we had the Esalen Institute. Have you ever heard of them?
Yeah.
The Esalen Institute was very much, with their facade of, New Age spirituality. It was the ideal place where they could then, behind the scenes, experiment certain things. Let's not forget that it was Aldous Huxley, The Doors of Perception, but also a guy who, aside from being a very good writer, was also involved with mind control, and for that reason moved to the United States.
Yeah. This is going to lead to, we'll talk about this a little bit, further into the show, David Wilcock and New Age movement.
Yes.
That's all MK Ultra. You start to look on it from another angle, because I was involved with it, and I was like, something's not right here. So I just pulled out of it, and I started looking at it from a different, point of view. And the people are very MK Ultra and New Age stuff.
Okay, let me tell you my experience with David. Of course, the guy has died. I have respect for people who die. Absolutely. I mean, I'm not like about bashing people, but I have to be honest. He bashed me with no reason when I was in a very weak. Yes. What happened was that in 2010, 2011, 2010, I mean, my father, I think that it was just before or after my father had just died. And I was trying to, my wife, my current wife has come to live with me in Italy. We were establishing ourselves there, and I started to publish these books in Japan, which were very, very successful. The first two books were done with Benjamin Fulford, who used to work for Forbes, who I knew for a few years, and who I went and met personally in 2009.
Nice.
In Tokyo. When I went there to Tokyo, in Italy, they had just, it was rather let's say a synchronicity, and that is quite interesting, but also a coincidence, because there wasn't anything that I willingly did for that reason. I mean, I didn't go to Japan for that reason. However, it happened that these Japanese were stopped at the border, I think, with Switzerland, I'm not sure, and they had this bunch of bonds. We're talking here about trillions, but the whole thing was apparently connected to this dragon family, this Chinese Freemasonry that was financed at the time when, now we're talking about Taiwan, for example, at the moment, because Taiwan is all over the news. But for many decades, I saw the interview Trump did when he talked about Taiwan. And he said that, they let it happen. But Taiwan, let's not forget, it was a strategic move that was possible only because of Henry Kissinger. Henry Kissinger was the great guy, if we want to call him great, was the guy in charge of national security, basically, because he came up with this idea, first at an academic level, but then in a practical level, of using nuclear power to create a whole new world order strategy. And of course, the Chinese, after the takeover of Mao Zedong, they were still a young country. They didn't have any nuclear power. They didn't have any nuclear arsenal. And for that reason, they could be blackmailed in accepting Taiwan. Taiwan and China, they were one country before the communist takeover. A communist takeover that from the beginning of the 1950s onwards saw the buildup of what we now see as modern China, happened after the long march of Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong, who is now revered, with his image on the Red Square and almost like a god. They even put these images in, all these churches in China have to accept to put this image almost like he's a saint inside. And including the Catholic Church, who had to sign a deal. I talk about it in the book, in volume 12 of my confession, with a whole chapter about the Chinese and the Jesuits, because they go back hundreds of years. Anyway, the thing is that they didn't have any nuclear arsenal, so it was easy. Kissinger simply said, you do one thing wrong to Taiwan, we gonna nuke you like we did with Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And at that point, of course, China had to back off from their intention. When the empire had, the previous, the Chinese empire had fallen to pieces, and modern China came forward, it was actually all together. The project was together. So now this money, going back to the money that we were mentioning, there was these bonds, and they were all part of money, and we're talking about immense sums, right, that the Americans have planted in Asia in order to finance anti-communist activities, maintain the countries under their control. So suddenly you have similar boxes full of bonds in South Korea. Of course, you have gold and hidden also in other places, Filipino, China, like all these areas, okay? The thing is that when these two Japanese guys were arrested by the Italian finance police, and they were confiscated all this, because the Italians, couldn't even understand what was written on the passports, because but these guys managed to go back to Japan. But the box with the stuff, they had a suitcase, a briefcase, sorry, they were carrying full of this stuff, was in the hands of the Italian finance police. Italian finance police, when they started to analyze the content of it, they said that this is stuff which is probably connected to the American government. So then, they took contact and that. In any case, at one point, Benjamin Fulford told me, can you help me out, because on behalf of the Japanese authorities, to connect with the Italian authorities to see if we can maybe understand what we can do about the stuff?
Wow.
I said, okay, no problem. I mean, I don't have a problem. Actually, I have people I know from my previous life within the structure of the New World Order. I know people even in the World Economic Forum. I know people who, in the Principality of Monaco that were part of the World Economic. So, I mean, I actually connected with my friend Daniele Dal Bosco, who used to be a treasurer in the lodge, but he's still to this day a financial expert. I think he has a company in Swiss, I'm not sure. But in any case, he was connected with, his father is a former Italian politician, a member of parliament. And I said, do you want to sort this out? Because Berlusconi at the time was in charge, he was the prime minister. So he said, okay. And so he connected with these people, and they then after showed the Japanese what the stuff that was confiscated, and they decided somehow to give it to this Daniele Dalbo, to bring it to the people, to see if what the United Nations will do about this. Because here we are talking about the sums of money which are out of order. I mean, that could change the destinies of a country. I'm talking about such. But the problem with all this money and this is that if you are not the guy on the bonds written, and you are not the guy who is figuring as the intestate, you have to have the name on these documents, and they didn't have their own name on this. So the value is relative. Anyway, we got involved various people, and then at one point, this whole thing, Fulford, we discovered that Fulford was working with the Chinese.
Wow.
And he was working with the Chinese through the Hongmen, which are these Chinese Freemasons who have members in both in mainland China as well as Taiwan.
Wow.
And this form of Freemasonry that exists for the last 2 or 3 centuries is a form of Freemasonry that has existed. It's basically the Chinese are very good at how you say, copying everything. We know that they steal everything possible, imaginable. So when they saw Freemasonry was very successful in the 18th century in Europe, they simply picked up the symbol, compass and square and all the rest, and they inserted in one of their own secret societies, which was actually rather ancient. So it didn't really have to do with classic Freemasonry. It's their own thing. Okay, it has those 6 million members. It's very influential. They were so influential that the founder itself, because paradoxically, one of the most important lodges is in here in the United States, in San Francisco, in the Chinese community there.
Wow.
So the whole thing, I went to Japan. I went there. I saw this Masonic stuff, and he wanted to explain. I said, "Okay, so how was your initiation?" And Fulford said, "Oh well, they brought me downstairs. There was a bunch of skeletons, and they said, if you want to get back upstairs, you have to take this oath. Otherwise, we're gonna leave you with the skeletons here, and you're just gonna join them." It was very basic, and
Wow.
it's very practical. I then studied a little bit with a guy from San Francisco, one of the few Americans to join the Chinese, because the thing is that they are also involved with preserving certain martial arts, the Chinese Freemasons. So I have a lot of respect for martial artists. I've been very passionate myself. So he explained me how a lodge of Freemasons, Chinese Freemasons, works out, how you have this. The key of the ceremony is the incense. The master of ceremonies, this guy goes around with a pair of I don't know how you can now in English, I don't know, but always with this incense around and all kinds. I described a little bit of this, I think, in volume 2 of my Confessions. Anyway, I go back to Rome after being in Japan with my current wife. We come because she had lived many years in Japan, so we
Wow.
went. We live. I got this book deal in Japan, so everything was great. But then suddenly, one day out of the blue, David Wilcock contacts me. He contacts me, and through this, I think it was called ASW. I don't know. It was like an elite form of social network. Like, I don't know if you ever heard of a small world, it was called. That was the initials. I don't know if it still exists, but basically, you can only access this. It was like a Facebook for multi-billionaires that I had accessed only because my friend, one from the lodge, who of course I knew very well, said, "Oh, Leo, you want to join?" I said, "Okay, I don't have any millions, but if you want me to join," and it was like you join this kind of social network, and it has very strict rules because the people you find on there, they're really big people, really.
Oh.
So David Wilcock, for some reason, had joined this, and
Wow.
through I don't know, but in any way, he asked my phone number, or I don't know if it was a Skype contact. So I talked with him. And he's like, "Can you put me in contact with Benjamin Fulford?" And I'm like, "Yeah, no problem. I mean, we wrote a couple books together. I'm sure he will be pleased to know that you are eager to because I heard about David Wilcock. It's not that, but I was a little bit skeptic because the way he introduced himself, it was like, I'm this, that, and all the other. And I'm like, yes, okay. I didn't ask you to tell me who you are. I mean, for me, you could be nobody, you can be anybody. But I mean, the way he introduced me, said, no, because I'm, people say that I'm the new this, the new that. And so I noticed he had a very big ego. But I couldn't care less. I said, okay. I remember I was with my wife in this little village near Rome, and we were talking with him. And so I said, okay, no worry. I give you the connection, the contact with the Benjamin Fulford. And so that's, the beginning of their collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
Then after a few months, I see that the guy is doing these shows with Benjamin Fulford, talking about all this thing about the bonds that in the meantime have gone out of control, because then there was this NSA or former NSA guy who got involved, who wanted to get General Alexander involved. All kinds of things happened. And so it became like, and actually, I have somewhere, actually, there is still documents that you can find online about this case. Because suddenly this guy moved the case against Berlusconi, the Italian government, for having taken this stuff originally.
Wow.
And even my friend Daniele Dal Bosco, which is the one I put in contact. So I felt a little bit, and then there was my name cited in the whole thing, all over this. Then they eventually, after a couple of years, they gave up on this hideous court case because they didn't have any base. But David Wilcock and Benjamin Fulford, who in the meantime I had stopped working with him when I discovered he was working with the Chinese, he came to Rome, he told me that. I said, okay, for me, that's it. I don't work with the Chinese. I have, let's say, whatever you want from me, but don't ask me to work with the Chinese. I'm very strict with my values. I will never work for a communist. It's simply the way I am. You might.
Good job.
That's it. So I was like, okay. But then he was bad mouthing me with Ben and David Wilcock, and they were doing shows, and they said, "Oh, Zagami, the P2, this, that." Zagami wanted to kill me, said Benjamin Fulford at one point, and then Wilcock, "Oh, really?" And then and then they were. So it was like I had presented somebody with good intention, with a good heart.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, after a few months, I have this guy who has a massive audience, because David Wilcock had a massive audience.
Yeah.
slamming me and accusing me of things I never did. And so I felt a little bit, you know. When I came the first time here in the United States in May 2019, what happened was that my publisher, which is also your publisher for one of your books, Blood Oaths, said, Leo, I'm at contact in the desert. And I just arrived here in Palm Springs, where I have been residing ever since. And he said, come and visit. So I go there, you know, and you had all the various people from Ancient Alien, all the various UFO. Yeah. But the special guest of the event was actually David Wilcock that year. Yep. And that Corey, whatever his name. Yeah. So I was like, wow, man, maybe I get to see this guy and I get to tell him, you know, face to face that he's an asshole, basically. You know, but apparently we were there, you know, I went in and out of this content in the desert, and I went there in the evening, and then this guy comes to me and says, no, but David Wilco is very scared that you are here. He has 8 bodyguards and he's locked up in his room. I was like, the pathetic little whatever. So that really kind of, I mean, ruined for me any credibility of the guy.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
But also because in that environment, you have the New Age prevailing cult. That really is the point we want to discuss here with you today, no?
Nice lead in. Wow, that built the story perfectly for this. Good job. Now, one thing I wanted to share with you real quick is you have a fan in here, Tarina Piccirillo. I've done some shows with her. She's really amazing, brain chemistry and so forth, brain health. So with Kennedy assassination, it became well-established practice of using trauma-based mind control in the masses. Challenger, school shootings, 9/11. I love Leo's information. Thanks for having him on.
Trauma-based mind control is the plot of the Manchurian Candidate, and it is really what MK Ultra was all about. Because aside from the use of drugs, you had electroshocks, you had sleep deprivation, you had basically a way of molding the person and creating even multiple personalities. Now we have also other things within the MK Ultra which are interesting. There was a specific project that was conducted in San Francisco, for example, where they had a place where they are fueled with prostitutes, drugs, and all kinds of things, you know. And then, of course, San Francisco was the place to be, because then it became, in fact, the hippie central, no? But at the same time, it had a dark side, because it was also the place where in 1966, Anton LaVey founded the Church of Satan. So there was a dark side to the age of Aquarius.
Wow. Yeah, so Anna Luna, Paulina, she's involved in all this stuff. She's involved with Jeffrey Epstein. She's involved with JFK, MK, Martin Luther King, MLK, because that was also some files that were taken from, the office space. 40 boxes. Wow. And how did they get in her office?
First of all, you have to understand that, they didn't have any jurisdiction, but obviously the moment in which they arrived there, they must have arrived in a way that they gave them these 40 boxes. Yeah. Now, so that's it. And regarding to Anna Paulina Luna, she's a very ambiguous figure, because she presents herself as a Christian. In reality, she's the daughter of a Jewish Sabbatean Frankist, basically, because that's what it is. Okay. Yeah. So she's a little ambiguous in her position. I mean, she seems to be always wanting to act as gatekeeper of great secrets, involved with the disclosure efforts, mentioning the book of Enoch.
That makes so much sense, because when Netanyahu came, she was like, oh, it's like almost bowing down to him. I was like, what?
Well, because her real name is not Anna Paulina Luna. It's not a real surname, Luna.
Wow.
It's not a real surname. Well, if you want, we can find it here on the internet, but it's not a real surname. It's a very Jewish surname. connected with the Sabbatean Frankist milieu, which is the one that, as you know, I discussed in the Epstein files. So yes, there is always like, this attempt to present herself as the one who is eager to give us the secrets, but then she's not really giving us much.
No.
Now, let's make it very clear.
Contacted her on the JFK stuff. We have James Files, who, claims to be behind the fence, and his information is pretty rock solid, but they don't want anything to do with it. So I'm like, okay, you guys are phony. You're just, just talking smack. That you're just trying to like stir stuff up.
They are actually disappointing a lot also, though, with the UFO, UAP files, because it's been a big nothing burger. A lot of those videos were already circulating, a lot of those documents. Also, if they don't start to have some more serious dump next time, it's going to be even a bigger disappointment. However, they never gonna reveal the truth, because there is much more that links to reverse engineering and interest that, of course, go with national security interests and so on. However, the problem with all these, promises that Trump has made during his, campaign, is that when you don't respect these promises made, the promises kept, but you don't keep the promise. The promise was to absolutely have transparency on the JFK issue, to have transparency on the disclosure issue, to have transparency on the MK Ultra issue. I don't see that. MK Ultra, by the way, it's an old thing. What they're trying to hide is certain connections to do with assassinations that were carried on by these Manchurian candidates. And I'm not talking only about Lee Harvey Oswald, because they even attempted to kill, as we know, Fidel Castro. And they even attempted to act abroad by giving LSD to heads of state and other things, just to be able to, so there is a lot that they don't want to really disclose, and I don't think they will ever be disclosed.
Yeah,
sadly.
Well, the same thing with Epstein and Ghislaine, making them the whole focal point instead of all those other people there. 1,200 women have come forward.
It's
so somebody.
I think that what you are actually mentioning now is the biggest disappointment of them all, because we still don't have clarity regarding the Zorro Ranch. The Zorro Ranch should be raided by 1,000 agents and digged up all over the place, because God knows what they're gonna find, but nothing is allowed still to this day. And the property was bought by a guy who also is connected and is a member of the GOP, who is a candidate, I think, in Texas. So these things are unfortunately going to stain Trump's mandate. They're going to stain his presidency. And I'm very sorry for that. But unfortunately, we are also not really in the golden age. We know very well that when we go at the gas pump, you as well as me, we live in California. So here is not even, people are lamenting and saying, $4.50, $5 a gallon. Yeah, well, come to California, because now it's really becoming ridiculous. It's like,
It's going to be 10 before.
So there's no golden age if you have this kind of problems. And if the golden age is simply for those people who have been there partying with Trump in Mar-a-Lago, well, that is another thing. Sometimes bringing back things like MK Ultra in the news, this disclosure project that they are trying to bring forward at the government level, and all that seems to be a distraction. When we discuss the real intention of the ballroom, and people are like, what is the real intention of this ballroom? The real intention of this ballroom is not only the ballroom, but there is also the bunker under the ballroom and a medical facility, which itself is very important for Trump at the moment, because they want to extend his life thanks to a medical facility built under the borough.
Oh, wow. So it gets deeper again. So interesting. So had this one guy on, Craig Lund, who talked about he's got a book, Silicon Satan. I've read his book. We've had some conversations. So he's basically talking about how all of the big tech and, you know, on and on, because we're seeing the same thing with Epstein and political types and so forth, high money people, they basically have something on each other, all of them. And that usually is they've been with someone that's underage, and they have video of it, and they all have it on each other. So if anyone gets out of line, that's their thing, they're going to reveal. So it kind of stands to reason that everybody that's in those high levels might have something on them.
Yeah, it's like the swamp can't be drained, because any attempt to drain the swamp will automatically be blocked by some kind of blackmail. That I mean, it's pretty clear. I mean, I know that you might still, you know, see a positive outcome from this presidency. I'm a bit skeptical about that, because Major Taylor Greene recently at the Rand Paul Institute was very clear about certain things that happen, and I think that in the end, when she says that Trump said on her last phone call that they will hurt his friends, I mean, that is a genuine thing. I mean, it's something that should really alarm all of us. There is too many compromises to become rich in certain, to become ultra rich. And then, of course, as soon as you reach a certain level, they immediately send you a honeypot, like you mentioned, because this honeypot technique is old, very old. You know, in the intelligence services, been going on for decades and decades and decades. However, while, let's say, prior to, you know, prior to the 70s and 80s that liberalized the woman figure and everything, we might simply had a honeypot who was a prostitute, a normal woman of a certain age who goes with it. But because of the ethics and morals that were in place, that was enough to compromise somebody. Now, to compromise somebody, of course, it's the pedophilia and the underage thing. That is the only way they can literally ruin you. And we have seen that with Matt Gaetz. Matt Gaetz, very naughty boy, Matt Gaetz, as they say. Matt Gaetz was the guy who was compromised and who was taken out of the picture immediately. He was candidate to become head of the DOJ.
Yep.
In
what was it? Was it Attorney General, or was it
No. He was supposed to become, I think, head of the DOJ. The position Pambondi had, basically. Yes.
That's right.
Okay. So what happened was, in 1 month, they got rid of his candidacy and rid of him from Congress.
Yeah. Wow. That's why some people are like, yeah, we have to sit on this Epstein stuff.
And Matt Gaetz knows a lot. And in fact, I tend to listen to him.
He'll disappear if he does.
He talks a lot, but he doesn't say too much, because he knows that if he wants to keep on his last job that he has there on, what is it, that news service he works for, I don't remember the name. I can't remember, AON, I don't know, something, I don't know how it's. But in any case, the guy went from being present with Trump at every single speech he was giving during the presidential campaign. There was always Matt Gaetz. And then now Matt Gaetz is nowhere to be seen, if not on TV and on a very peripheral, and he's not even a Congress member anymore. So they can get of you very, very fast.
So he's probably going to disclose a lot of guys talk smack, like Cash Patel, He's like, when I'm in there, I'm gonna do this and that. And Jeffrey Epstein, all the stuff we know about him, that's true. There's nothing else. Like, oh wow, somebody got to you, didn't they?
Absolutely. Now, regarding instead what is happening with the Epstein, the whole Epstein thing, there is, of course, an article I posted regarding Sophia the robot, because Sophia the robot recently made her classical musical debut on April 29. Everybody was applauding, but nobody mentions the fact that behind this robot, behind Hanson Robotics and behind the software that this robot is using, there was actually the financing of Jeffrey Epstein. And Jeffrey Epstein has financed a lot of things, And Sophia the robot in particular is quite interesting, because in 2013, 3 years before Sophia was launched officially, she was turned on basically, before becoming the superstar of the robotic world. Epstein had actually talked about this project and had mentioned the name Sophia for this project. So we know there is now evidence, plenty of evidence, that he financed this whole thing from the start. The software that was eventually used by Hanson Robotics, it was financed by Jeffrey Epstein. So I don't know. Somebody's saying that she actually looks a little bit like Virginia Giuffre. I mean, anything is possible at this point.
Yeah, who was basically taken out. Or was she? You think she's in hiding, or was she really taken out?
We really don't know.
No,
one thing I know about Jeffrey Epstein is that the guy could be easily cloned, because he actually had been working on that kind of projects.
Yeah. So this is all very much like Westworld.
Yeah. I guess so.
So he looks like he was moving things in that direction.
Well, he was working with this Ben Goertzel, who is the AI pioneer who helped build Sophia the robot. It's interesting also that these characters always come from the same milieu of Sabbatean Frankists, Jewish Sabbatean Frankists. It seems like there is some kind of connection there. And then we had recently a big scandal. I don't know, the screen is all black on my side. I can't see. Westworld. Here it is. Westworld was a great movie. The original,
you saw that?
The 1973.
That movie I saw when I was a teenager. Yeah, wow.
I tell you one thing about Westworld and why I like it so much. Because my grandmother was a great friend of Yul Brynner. They went both to the same acting school.
Wow.
She then taught acting, also at the actor studio.
That's right.
She taught acting. But Yul Brynner was definitely a great actor. So his impersonation of the black, the cowboy with the black outfit there was incredible. And I was like really. I mean, when I was a kid and I used to watch it, it scared me. It scared me that to see that robots could really take over in that way. But the thing is that China has demonstrated that. You see, one thing that we need to address is, I think this week, we have all been privy, of course, to Trump's visit to Xi Jinping in China. Together with Trump, there was a bunch of very important journalists that followed, so from various ABC, NBC, and so on. And even Fox, and every one of them talked about the robots in China. They dedicated large parts of their news to these robots, and they were fascinated by these robots and how incredible these robots were. And there was also it was quite impressive to see that they are definitely moving forward. And I don't think that America stands a chance against these people, because they are very much. I mean, we stand a chance as people who want to preserve something that is still pure, but we are a minority in this country, even because you know the new generations, they might be, you know, willing to give up all their freedoms and take in a robot in their home. I'm not, you know, and I never want a robot in my home. I mean, I saw the scene in which Brett Bayer from Fox News was ordering a sausage there, but nowadays you have robots even in the McDonald's in Beijing.
Oh, wow.
So it's like that is the future. Unfortunately, it's a very dull and terrible future.
Leo, I'm gonna switch internets because we're glitching. So they do that sometimes. So it's gonna be black just for a second. Right.
Okay. No worries. As you are switching, I'm gonna stay on. So I'm gonna probably talk with your audience at this point just to keep on the vibe going. We are discussing. Here you are. You are a bit better. You were not looking so good before. Now you're looking much better.
Very good.
Somebody says Michael has been replaced. No, it's still Michael. Don't worry. There's no clone. There's no robot.
People call me clone a lot because when they want to attack me. So yeah, the clones and robots and all that stuff. Yeah, I remember as a kid thinking, wow, that's going to come someday. And I think maybe we're already there. So who knows how much the
China is demonstrating their superiority in this futuristic setup, and unfortunately, it seems like the American media who followed the Trump, they were all very enthusiastic all about it. They were all like, "Wow, you know, check out this robot. He can do this. He can do that." I mean, we are talking here about the biggest threat to mankind ever known, to the very future of our race. And then we have, you know, this possibility that in 10 years from now, we will be merging with the machine more and more. And I think that while here in the West, we will encounter still maybe some, you know, resistance, I think that in China, they're going to go for it. And so soon we're going to see, you know, Chinese going around half machine, half man. And that would be not really a problem for them.
Yeah.
Because the problem here, you know, when let's remember that China is a country that is building up an army of robots already. And is also building an army of cyborgs, of people who are trying to already mix elements of the AI and robotics with their own system. You know, like you can actually give more power to your own feet if you put a helper there. You know, like suddenly you are the bionic man. That's
bionic. Yep, absolutely. They got legs they can put on, all kind of crazy stuff, and you can run. They'll keep you going for however many hours the battery pack lasts. So it's pretty impressive. Now, I think China, maybe they show us their stuff to try and intimidate us. And I think we hold a lot of stuff back. So I think we're very advanced. And this is one of the videos that they're releasing now.
Well, it definitely shows that the future also the military is very much connected.
All right, here they are, A1, San Diego. 1st Battalion made up completely of humanoid robots, all lined up, ready for inspection. Ra-01, give me a salute.
Acknowledged.
And say something for the camera.
Unit 1 operational. All systems nominal. Awaiting orders.
Yeah.
Wild time.
Well, I mean, it's all fine and dandy, but if you have one of these guys knocking at your door and saying you need to be microchipped, or you need to be, you know, wearing this bracelet, or you know, we are monitoring you for your safety, whatever. I mean, I'm not really like. I think that this is the biggest challenge that we have as humans.
I think so. And I know you're martial art trained. I'm martial art trained. I got lots of guns everywhere, knives and all kind of.
But you can't do anything against these people.
Yeah,
these robots.
Like you said, if they come knocking at your door, whatever they want.
We have seen robots in China doing martial arts at a
That's right.
fast pace.
Yep.
But the difference is, if if you have a human martial artist that gives you a kick, you might survive. If this guy gives you a kick, you're dead automatically because it's gonna destroy you. So I mean, we are talking about the strength of 1,000 people in one of these monsters, But it is definitely a Terminator kind of reality that we're gonna be facing, and it's not really anything that I will be, encouraging. I think that I will be encouraging instead for the future of mankind to return to traditions, to return to reading books, to spending time with your family and friends outside of the internet, outside of robotics. The problem is that these robots are going to take the job of a lot of people. And AI also is going to take the job of a lot of people. And so what is the human being going to be left with if they can't work?
Creativity.
Yeah, well, creativity. I already imagine a lot of people that will be simply eating popcorn on their, laying around like slobs. And then in the end, I don't know.
Probably. But I think a lot of but this leads us to, because we're talking about the David Wilcox.
There will be a lot of couch masters of the couch.
A lot of couch masters. Yep. And but I think that what we're moving in towards is a moving into higher spirituality. And I think that some of the churches, some of their
that is an interesting thing that you are saying, because in reality, the capacity of the mind of doing certain things is not being really developed to full potential, and that's why now we could actually use this evolution to evolve also with using more of the capacity of our brains. We use only a very small percentage of that capacity, and so we could maybe arrive to a new level of awareness, but also we could maybe trigger those powers that were also part of some of these experiments that were done also with the MK Ultra and everything else, that came after. Because after, if you remember, after MK Ultra was exposed in the middle of the 70s, then in the late 70s, people like Michael Aquino and started to plant the seeds for another kind of mind control within the psychological operation units, and also to experiment much more with spiritual things, and the whole thing of Project Stargate was about also triggering a use, the remote viewers that that actually apparently gave a lot of results. And at the same time, you had in Russia, Russians doing the same thing. So there was a lot of things that have been experimented here in the United States and in Russia in regards to remote viewing, but also many other hidden faculties of the brain.
Yeah, so the higher spiritual realms, that's where I got my intuitive remote viewing abilities. So I was into Native American spirituality. Of course, I grew up Baptist, and I enjoy the biblical. I still to this day, I believe in Jesus and all these different things. But it took me to a very high, meditation and taking my consciousness, understanding my consciousness, by working with the SEAL teams. Knowing that I can push myself to great extents, and then the meditation, shooting, the hand-to-hand stuff basically taught me to go into brainwave states that helped me to go into those states of consciousness. So I think that is something that more people will start to tap into, and some of these religions that are very controlling, I think people are just going to break free from them. Just our consciousness is going to rise to a point here on Earth that we're just going to break free from a lot of this control system.
Well, think about in 1984 when they launched that 5-month experiment called Project Jedi, which then was inspirational now for later on that man who stared at the ghost, then both the book and the film, no, the whole thing. I mean, in the late 70s, like I said, in early 80s, there was Lieutenant Colonel John B. Alexander, there was Michael Aquino, there was this parapsychological research that was starting to really be formally used, in manuals that came out. There is, I remember there was a manual called First F Battalion Operations that was published in 1979. Then you had, so you had really a lot of interest within the military in developing these kind of things. And we
there's the dark side of it, though, I think. So there's a light side where you're connecting with God and that level of
I think that inevitably, if you use it within the context of the military, then you will not be able to do it only for a good intention. You are simply operating under instructions, under orders. So
that's why I never had military connections, training or anything like that. And then the CIA, I came in and did a lie detector test, and they're asking me all about my book, because I just wrote a book, The Intuitive Warrior, and I talked about my powers of consciousness and knowing things and helping people stay alive, and sending out prayer, love, energy, focus, and so forth. And they wanted to know more about that. And as I talked, they're trying to do mind control on me. They're doing MK Ultra on me. And I've been through prison of war camp training and all kind of crazy stuff over the years, though I understood what they were doing. But I was like, why are they doing that to me? And then eventually I found out a year later, I was like, what's taking so long for them to promote me after I did their, and I'm sure I blew their mind, their MK Ultra mind control, program stuff away. And a group came to me later and they said, you actually failed it, but we're going to pass you anyway. And and then when I look back on that, it's like they couldn't control me. They couldn't control my time. That's what they wanted, so that they could use me. And when they couldn't do that, they just wanted to, kick me out. And eventually, that's pretty much what they did. All right, so I left the CIA, and then my world, came apart, kind of like you. You had experience about this.
No.
But, yeah.
Well, I mean, it's very good, though, that you didn't compromise, because there is, unfortunately, I mean, you have to really, for them, be a blank sheet, and you don't have to have any ethics and morals, because those have to be bypassed by the instructions they give you. Now, that is the whole thing. So MK Ultra eventually, like we said, faded away, but the techniques they created became part of a much larger and influential operation. And then we saw that, for example, when it was in 2012 under Obama, they eventually, with the Smith-Mundt, they gave their permission, finally, the Congress, to do these operations, psychological operations on the American people. So that is really what, because you see, up until that point, as Americans, we were not really influenced by our own propaganda efforts. However, the excuse that they put to change the law that had been there for decades was that because you had certain minorities now here in America, like for example the Arab Islamic minority, they had to influence with operations, psychological operations, they needed to have the permit to do it to the whole American population.
Mm-hmm.
So the American population suddenly is I mean, the Smith-Mundt Act of 1948 meant that if you were, for example, in Europe, in Germany, in Italy, in any other country of NATO, you could be brainwashed and you could be subject to American propaganda. That's why you have Voice of America in the first place. while instead after the Reformation that was done, now they can basically, you know, there is nothing preventing the State Department and all the related agency to distribute government-funded media and propaganda within the United States. I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
For over 60 years, they had been banned. I think it was 2000, sorry, I said 12, but it was 2013, the Modernization Act was applied, the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act. And that was, I think, at the beginning, because, you see, their problem was the internet has bypassed every known frontier. We live in, you know, in a situation where aside from maybe blocking, like we just said earlier, no, the website of some news agency in Cuba or the government because they are at the moment under sanctions or whatever. But generally speaking, anybody who just goes and changes their own address, VPN address, whatever, they can bypass this problem and they can access to anything around the world. Okay? And that means you don't have the same capacity of compartmentalizing the propaganda. So they needed the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act, which in fact I discussed amply in volume 11, to make sure that then with the internet, well, now we are all subject to control. That's it. Which is, you know.
I noticed it in the CIA too when that happened. And Obama, John Brennan, they really started to come down on a lot of us in the CIA that were doing the good stuff. So, like you and I, we're constantly pushing back on, you know, that control system.
I mean, you know, they removed those necessary safeguards that made of the American people that safe haven. Also at a mind level, in the sense that we were living our American dream without being bombarded by the constant negativity or the propaganda that was inflicted instead in countries like Italy or in countries like Germany. In Germany, you know, the effort was the biggest because after they had lost the war, and now we have Trump who wants to even take away the troops from Germany. But back in the days, it was essential to have Voice of America and constant brainwashing through every single media outlet that had to be controlled. Even in Italy, every single media outlet will be controlled, and it's still controlled to this day. So it's let's say that this legislation, and you said it very well, you know, with Obama, things started to change.
Yeah.
And suddenly now we are all in the same ship, as they say, you know. So wherever you are in the world, you're subject to the same propaganda efforts.
All over the world, yeah.
There is no, because like I said, the internet has, let's say, broken that barriers, those safekeeping barriers that were in place.
Absolutely. All right, sir. Again, fantastic show.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Reach you, leozagami.com, and you also have a YouTube channel.
Yes, I want to really, stress once again that we are about to have a very big turning point in our history with everything that is happening, even with this soft disclosure that is ongoing. But there is something really big behind it, and so let's say that 2026 is going to be the year zero of something really big. And I'm glad that in a couple of weeks I can come back here and I can present you a new product of, a new literary product, which is also going to unveil a bunch of things to you and your audience that are pretty fascinating and mind-blowing. So I'm glad that we are
coming up. Good job.
So we're gonna still be, today was good though, to, in the meantime, understand that we are on the same page when it comes down to what is happening with these missing efforts in regards to MK Ultra, JFK. We are always really, we are never really given everything, because unfortunately there is too many interests at stake. And that is the big problem here. But people like you and me are instead trying to spread the truth, to make people more aware, and to actually guide them towards an independence, also in the way they reason. They don't have to follow the herd. They don't have to simply say, it's okay, I'm just gonna follow what they tell me to do. No, I think that we are about to see some big changes. And I also tell you that this disclosure thing with the UFO, UAP thing is really disappointing a lot of people that are thinking about bringing now some truths out without the government consent. That might really then trigger some massive panic and reactions. So we have to be very careful now about the next moves, because think about it. America might not want to reveal certain things because of their own interest, but then another country might say, oh, I don't care, I'm going to tell them. And at that point, what are you going to do? As we Americans have to be always spearheading this Western civilization, we should give the good example, and instead of refraining from giving the truths about all these things, we should just say, okay, this is the truth, and as the gospel says, the truth should set you free, which is it is paradoxical that we have at the entrance of Langley in Virginia, the headquarters of the CIA, written in big, the truth should set you free, and instead the truth is never setting free anybody out of all the lies that they keep on feeding us. I mean, no? All the best. God bless you guys, and thank you for having me on. We're gonna speak in a couple of weeks, guys. That's gonna be great. Prepare yourself. All the best.